drawing discussions, not drawing discussions, to the Teaching Drawing Symposium held by Drawing Projects UK and Drawing is Free this afternoon. And this is part of the engagement programme alongside the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize project. And I'm the director of both the Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize and the Drawing Projects UK. And I'm also the Dean of Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art and Design at the University of Dundee. So I'm really thrilled to welcome and introduce Chloe Briggs from Drawing is Free to introduce the Teaching Drawing Symposium II, which builds on the previous one we held in association with the Drawing Prize in October.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I was thinking earlier about how to introduce this event, and I remembered actually having the idea for the first one when I was washing up. I'm quite distinct. I had this idea about how to hold this PechaKucha style teaching symposium and how that would be an interesting thing for me personally to learn from. And I didn't predict the amount of interest and excitement around the first event, which then led to Anita saying, I think we need to do a Teaching Drawing Symposium II. And I think we're probably talking about, well, we would like to do number 3 also because it's an incredibly engaging and inspiring format. And we have 10 speakers from different parts of the world, passionate about drawing in all different, and sharing a passion for drawing in all different ways, people of different ages, different cultures, different perspectives. It's very exciting, and I'm excited to launch this here now. I think we're going to just go straight in and start. Anita's going to share the presentation and I will introduce each speaker. I'll give a short introduction to each speaker before their presentation launches, and then it will just flow through. We will have a pause after 5 speakers, and we would like everybody who's joining just to stay online with us. But we'll have a 5-minute pause, and then we'll be back. So, as I said, this is the second drawing symposium with presentations by Jake Spicer, Duncan Cameron, Jennifer Prinz, Ilga Leimanis, Helene Fromen. And we're going to start with Jake Spicer, who is an artist, author and drawing tutor based in North Wales. He's the head tutor of the independent drawing school, Draw Brighton, and co-director of the Drawing Circus. Jake, your slides are going to start very shortly.
Thanks, Chloe. Sit close to the model or object which you intend to draw and lean forward in your chair. Focus your eyes on some point, any point will do, along the contour of the model. Place the point of your pencil on the paper. Imagine that your pencil point is touching model instead of paper, and without taking your eyes off the model, wait until you are convinced that the pencil is touching that point on the model upon which your eyes are fastened. Then move your eyes slowly along the contour of the model and move the pencil slowly along the paper. As you do this, keep the conviction that the pencil point is actually touching the contour. Be guided more by the sense of touch than by sight. This means that you must draw without looking at the paper, continuously looking at the model. That description of blind contour drawing comes from page 9 of The Natural Way to Draw, the posthumously published instructional drawing book by Kimonica Ladies, which was released in 1941. 40 years later, the exercise was widely popularised in Betty Edwards' Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain here, and has become a staple of drawing courses around the world. So many tutors use it in their classes that we can dismiss it sometimes as a trite warm-up. So let's unpick some of its elements. As a gateway to learning, blind contour drawing requires the student to trust the tutor. It breaks down the hierarchy of ability in a group. It encourages a focus on process rather than outcome. And it encourages an attitude of serious play. It places honesty of response over visual accuracy. It also aids students' perception by requiring direct, unfaltering observation and connecting visual observation to the process and experience of touch. It replaces symbolic interpretation of the subject with observation of contour and shape. And it aids students' mark making by requiring the hand to respond directly to the eye's perception. It produces a clear, confident line. And it helps a student to trust their ability to move their pencil tip without having to watch it. On our long-term drawing course at Draw, we set out to teach the universal skills of drawing. While it's entirely acceptable, in fact, even preferable for students to develop embodied rather than intellectual knowledge of drawing, it's necessary for educators to have a deeper understanding. It's not enough to simply know that an exercise works. To better teach drawing, we must understand why they work. While at Draw we knew which exercises helped students to improve, we could teach those exercises and we could mentor students in their own personal practice, we lacked the theoretical grounding for a definitive curriculum. So I started to list the elements of common drawing exercises and simplify those elements into fundamental units. Here's a partial breakdown of a blind contour drawing. The predominant 21st century drawing traditions and educational paradigms give different accounts of drawing. As each can lead to good drawing practice, we have to consider them not to be opposing, but analogous of the descriptions of the elephant given by the blind men in the Indian parable. Each paradigm alludes to one aspect of what drawing can be, but falls short of describing its entirety. To create a framework of theory on which to build a new course, I broke down the common elements and processes of each tradition of drawing education, in the same way as I've broken down the elements of blind contour drawing, identifying the perceived qualities, perceptual skills, elements of visual language that seemed indivisible and universal. By removing the exercises themselves and any duplicated units, this left me with a kind of periodic table of drawing elements. But this in itself wasn't a particularly helpful tool, so the next question was how to arrange these elements usefully. I started with the common drawing framework that we use for discussing a drawing. Drawing or a drawing involves a durational element, time. It involves materials, whether that's charcoal or light and a camera set to a slow shutter speed. It requires a subject, actual or notional, and a guiding intention. To dig deeper into the drawing part of that diagram, the complete, that is complete, not finished drawing, always sits somewhere on a spectrum between abstraction and representation, illustrated on the left, and a spectrum between process, drawing as verb, and outcome, drawing as noun, on the right. So then going back to that earlier diagram to expand on the constituent categories in red, we can also relate the idea of time to a method or order of working. We can relate materials to mark making and visual language, subject accounts for sources of imagery, observation, memory, imagination, while the intention of the drawer always guides design. And stepping back from that, we can arrange all of the earlier elements of drawing into that structure. Subject and their accompanying perceptual skills sit parallel to materials and their accompanying visual languages, bridged by the necessary element of time and practical method. Intention is overarching, guiding conscious and unconscious design and decision-making, and defining how we access the drawing. Any practical processes, methods, or traditions of teaching can be accounted for then in that structure, showing common ground between traditions that might otherwise seem contradictory. And that's helped me as a tutor understand how certain exercises help students to become more confident and competent. So this unified theory starts to show us the shape of the elephant, the whole to which traditions of drawing education allude. By seeing how our own orthodoxies fit into a larger theory, we can understand how we might expand the breadth of our teaching to account for the broad potential of contemporary drawing practice, while still teaching meaningful, concrete skills to students. The elements of this framework are not new, they'll be familiar to all drawing tutors. It simply organises the universal truths of drawing. But we have found the framework invaluable for helping devise courses, helping students to orient themselves as they learn and clarifying the language that we use to talk about drawing. In all, it's provided us with a foundation on which to build a curriculum of practical exercises and classes informed by theory that take us beyond just blind contour drawing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. I love that. I love that last slide there. And over to Duncan Cameron, who is an artist and educator living in the Southwest UK and has worked as an art lecturer in colleges and university for 27 years. He loves drawing and thinks that a passion and enthusiasm for the subject is key to teaching. Thank you, Duncan.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. That's great. I mean, that's what I'm starting with, really. I think a passion and a love for drawing is at the center of teaching drawing. You've got to want to draw. You can't always win. I've got a student in the background there on the mobile phone, I noticed after I'd uploaded this. But you've got to lead with a desire, you know, a wanting to draw. And I draw in many settings, in universities and colleges, in my teaching role. I draw myself all the time. I keep journals, some might say obsessively. So I'd fill a journal in 2 months, and there's maybe 88, I think, since the millennium, and they sit on shelves in my upstairs landing. And it's a form of memory. I'm recording a life lived, the things I'm seeing, the notes, the collages, observations. And that feeds into my teaching and discussion about contextual drawing and recording the moment. There are many artists that inspire me, and I work with students showing them many artists' work, of course. Dave McKean on the left, Frank Auerbach, Kirk Jackson, Chung Lee here. These are artists using collage, and in the short time we've got, we can't cover the many things that we do, but working with a mixed media surface can be a very exciting way into a drawing, breaking away from the white page. Quality of line, of course, is a really important thing here, Dryden Goodwin, Egan Sheila. Looking at the weight of a line, the pace, the kind of heaviness, the lightness, the touch of a line. And that conversation is a live conversation from the day you start drawing to the day you end drawing. It's something that we need to all be aware of, and the tools we use, and the way we leave a mark on the page. Of course, we draw for lots of reasons. I'll often draw, and students I'm working with in the foundation or the degrees I work on will often be using drawing to plan things, to design sculptures, to make mechanics work. Here's Jean Tangley, kinetic artist on the left. So drawing can be used as a tool to explain an idea to others, but also to yourself. So it's not just about the observation, it's about planning and design and thinking ahead, imagining. So here, trying to work out how to make a large man-eating plant. You know, to do that involves a lot of drawing, a lot of working through the mechanics to ensure that the giant man-eating plant can eat the students reliably every night. In this case, Little Shop of Horrors, just before the pandemic, thankfully. So drawing is used in lots of ways. In the life room, you know, following on from what Jake was saying, one of the things I would do is talk about anatomy a lot and actually kind of, you know, make that approachable. So with the skeleton, trying to draw the skeleton inside the body, obviously Leonardo da Vinci on the bottom left, my student's hands covered in charcoal, but trying to imagine and envisage that skeleton in the body from different angles can be really good fun. Drawing can often be quite an isolating activity, and one of the things I love to do in the life room with the students is get everybody to work in a circle, and then we collaborate and produce joint animations working together, so that the drawings, when rotated in this way, give a sense of form and shape that perhaps isn't the case on the single drawing. But also, it's a kind of democratization. There's a lack of hierarchy here. Everybody's contributing to a collective work. And as I work with students to build their online profiles, you know, it means they can share moving image media of their drawing practice, collaborating with their friends in the art classes on their feeds, Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, and such like. So animation can be a fun tool to work with as an educator and with students, and making it feel approachable. Of course, we've already mentioned play, but play is so important. Exploration, risk, material, experimentation. That's the heart of, I think, all good teaching, really. So encouraging students to, you know, be uncomfortable playfully with new ways of working. Here, working with sticks and drawing with wire, three-dimensional drawing, essentially, or cutting back into charcoal with rubbers and working in ways they hadn't done maybe previously. Sometimes, you know, skill can be a hurdle, and I use carbon paper with students often to just kind of break through that notion of representational study. And actually, by using carbon paper, of course, they can brackets cheat, but there is no cheating. And when you start working this way, the noise, the marks, the ancillary kind of incidental marks become very rich, and again, enliven those animations. Drawing can be three-dimensional, of course. David Oliviera here drawing in wire. And I'm working with my students in University of Plymouth and these other two pictures. So drawing with sticks and wire, but then using light to cast drawn shadows over the walls and the ceilings, you know, expanding the drawing beyond the page, lifting it off the surface. And that can be great fun as well. When lockdown came, almost a year ago now, you know, everyone was kind of fell back from their normal teaching roles. So I started drawing nature and studying nature and working with, obviously, my family at home and establishing Zoom. But before Zoom, a lot of time I spent looking at nature and keeping journals and finding new ways to share teaching of drawing when you haven't got students in front of you, you're deprived of a class. So I started working with things like time lapse and using phone apps to record drawing, the act of drawing, the process of making marks, often sitting in my shed at the beginning of the end of the day, building new routines. So this is a rat skull found, on a walk in that period early in lockdown. And sharing of those time-lapse films online instantly builds a conversation with online communities. Another form of teaching, of course, as you discuss technique and tools. So nature was tremendous solace, I think, for me and for many during lockdown, and still is, during this very difficult year. And finding ways to kind of draw about that and share with, groups such as Isolation Art School, I know Jake did also, became a really interesting way to teach, a new way to teach, a way we hadn't previously maybe considered, and sharing those experiences from all over the world, different communities of drawers sharing online. And I hope that continues. Drawing is often about observation. Here, the wonderful James Jean, who's got wonderful sketchbooks of observed people sitting at benches and so on, when we could go into cafes, and some drawings from when I was in London back in June, observing people in masks, which felt unfamiliar then, but perhaps less so now. So the observation and daily kind of, excitement of just drawing what you're seeing. Teaching drawing online has demanded lots of new skills, and many teachers, all teachers, I think, have found many solutions here using phones and phone clamps to share drawing practices with audiences, and joining Zoom live classes. I work with Adrian Dutton's London Life School live class on Zoom. I didn't think I'd be drawing on Zoom in a live setting, but actually that community of people drawing together has been tremendous, tremendous support for so many, myself included, over this last difficult year. And I've taken that enthusiasm for working on Zoom, drawing, into my class and my teaching spaces. I'm drawing most days now on Zoom with my students, and I think they really enjoy the fact that it's not passive. You're not just delivering information, but you're all drawing together. The kind of democracy of drawing, all collectively sharing that experience and drawing each other, taking turns to pose for 5 minutes perhaps. And there's some wonderful drawings. Drawing is also about memory. This is a piece of work by Lee John Phillips, who's drawing all of the objects in his grandfather's shed as a kind of act of a memory of his grandfather, his late grandfather. Candy Jernigan, collecting things in the streets of New York. This was me drawing a badger skull found last weekend on top of the daily newspapers. So context and time. Thank you.
Sorry, Jennifer, I was muted. I'm sorry, you're going to have to go. I'm very sorry. It was my fault. Sorry.
That's fine. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to show images that I use to expand my students' notion of drawing. I often start with the relationship between drawing and writing as an entry to explore what constitutes a drawing and to discuss the artist's hand. We look at signatures and how signatures become drawings, and discuss when is writing drawing and drawing writing, and is there a difference? The artist and poet Alice Addy elegantly combines both in her drawings, completed during the time of a course lecture. Their formal structure is enough to understand the subject matter, here Islam, without reading the related words captured during the lecture. Similarly, Justin Quinn substitutes the letter E for each word on the page of a page from the novel Moby Dick. And it shows how drawing and writing are both symbols, stand-ins, if you will, for objects and information, whether their meaning or what they represent is always clear or not. The relationship between writing and drawing can be further exploited, as Molly Springfield does, as she painstakingly renders photocopies taken of handwriting on book page from local libraries. Meaning and process are at first obscured in this detailed and impressive work. Drawing can also be used to represent research and data, personal or otherwise. And Lori Frick uses color and size to represent her personal and other individuals' sleep and mood analysis and data in playful drawings. Similarly, the artist Kate Bingham-Burt, who has earned the moniker Obsessive Compulsion for her series of daily drawings recording items that she has purchased in clear, bold lines and descriptive text. I love sharing this work with students as the example of personal research and how a simple project can be highly generative. Tiffany Chiang's work comes from a place of cultural research. This drawing is one of several depicting the migration of Vietnamese people, including the artist's own family, to other areas around the globe. The extensive research is paralleled by the painstakingly detailed drawing completed with micro and gel pens. Research and good drawings both often come from a place of close and careful observation, as does Brian Fay's drawings of crack formations on old master paintings. I love sharing these with students and asking them what he's actually drawn, how these beautiful patterns and lines are typically ignored when we look at artwork. Similarly, Seattle-based artist Libby Gerber makes topographic maps of the cracks in the sidewalk around her neighborhood that she sees during her walks. Making the mundane or unpleasant beautiful is a big part of Libby's process, and we see it in her colorful topographic contour lines. Mapping is indeed a drawing process and a valid way to understand and appreciate space, how we move through it. Certainly the case for Julia Fish's obsessive drawings of her home and studio space. We can draw and map the places in which we live, but also fictional spaces. And I love Mark Bennett's drawings of the homes of popular pop culture characters. Here, the home of the Jetsons from the TV show. The humor is subtle and it balances the formal reference to architectural blueprints, a type of drawing often known for conveying information. I tell my students that contemporary artists do not share or do not limit their media to paper. Translucent surfaces allow artists to layer and reveal and obscure other information and meaning. The map behind El Bernini's drawing heightens the sense of ritual and mystery in this otherwise typical portrait. Drawing can also be objects, and Russell Crotty draws the sky over LA with ballpoint pens onto spheres which hang from the gallery wall or ceiling and subtly move as the viewer passes by. Surface can and does create and hold intense meaning, and Whitfield Lovell exploits this in his charcoal portraits of African Americans. The work has a raw power that comes from using found photographs and wood from abandoned homes and barns. Travis Somerville uses antique fabric to emphasize and embody social injustices and explore historical moments in his work. With both artists, much of the work's power lies in the selection of surface and how the change in format embodies ideas that otherwise are held underneath the surface of the work. Another way I work to expand students' ideas of drawing is through scale. The Miami-based artist Amy Sizzle uses large rolls of paper that open and unfurl in the gallery like a monumental scroll. It's a dynamic use, making the work push towards sculpture in many, many ways. Ethan Murrow takes drawing to an extreme. Here in the garden, a drawing that spans 3 building floors for an impressive 53 feet in height was completed with a team of assistants and hundreds of acrylic markers. Murrow's work leads to discussions on process collaborations and artist assistance. But Hollis Hammond's work feels much more doable to my students, who can also draw all of the items around their apartment on typical 18 by 24 inch size paper and reassemble them onto the gallery wall, making something massive out of the typical format they work with. And lastly, though my goal for my students is to find their own hand, approach, and ideas, I realize more and more I'm an example of a practicing artist. So I share items from my practice, my drawings, and my daily studio regularly with them and hope to show them that all of us can continue to draw. Thank you
so much, Jennifer. And I'm sorry about your biography. It's all on the Drawing is Free website. This is Ilga Leimanis, who is a London-based artist, educator and writer, and she's taught drawing since 2007 and works internationally with a broad range of students and professionals looking to develop their communication and creativity skills.
Okay, so this is a story of a series of books I ran with non-drawers. My background is fine art, and when I started teaching, it was working with a broad range of students and professionals. who all wanted to gain drawing or be encouraged to experiment. My focus was always on the quick sketch and understanding basics. Each session ended with sharing and conversation. To motivate myself to draw more and discover my new city, London, I ran an urban sketching group, inviting everyone I knew to come draw with me. During a tour of the King's Cross area, together with urban regeneration students and local community groups, a participant noted being more sensitive in observation, being more alert about the place and its subtle aspects they would not always see. My starting point to engage these non-drawers was to use 3 distinct exercises: a blind contour to release fear of drawing, tonal reduction to reduce complexity, and a simple spatial drawing using 3 marker line weights to describe 3 distances. This was Old Street in 2014 with the Future of London Leaders Program for Urban Professionals. By drawing, candidates were encouraged to stop and really see an area undergoing significant change. By starting with a creative exercise in a public space, the candidates were out of their comfort zone, partly to set the tone for the course and partly to help them build empathy for other stakeholders who may have to operate and communicate out of their depth. A blind drawing was a great way to start. It worked as a confidence builder. The hand becomes an extension of the eye. The participants become aware of the importance of drawing, of looking, and it was also just that little bit weird and funny, this idea of not looking at the paper. Sorry, I'm going a bit fast. So this was Deptford Station, and you can see how the setup was. So they were all lined up, observing the scene below them. The next slide is an example of the view observed from the overground platform at Hackney Wick. The exercise aimed to create a route of synchronized communication between the eye and the hand. They had to draw slowly and carefully, picking up all of the details. The drawing hand moved in sync with what the eye is seeing. Hold your pencil in a relaxed, comfortable way. Pick a point to start anywhere of interest. I introduced a connection to writing, encouraging them to start at the top of the page with the skyline, capturing all the detail, and then picking up the pencil and starting another line lower down in the scene, below that and again, until you've reached the action on the street. In this case, Deptford Market comes due. For the Hackney Wick and Deptford case studies, I introduced a new exercise, working in collaboration. Each person chose a spot, so you can see them lined up across the bridge and down the canal, started the drawing, then they left the drawing where it was and moved over to the spot of the next person in the line. Picked up that drawing and continued for 10 more minutes. And then one final move and the drawings were done. At this time, collaboration was a part of my own practice. I was working collaboratively with other artists, and I was testing out to see if this could also work in the context with non-drawers. These drawings ended up a huge success. There was lots of comments, lots of excitement, lots of things. Oh, I didn't see that. A major part of the scene that had previously been invisible to them. They were actually forced to look and to see something. It was very exciting. By reviewing the drawings all together, this emphasized just how different people's perceptions of the same place can be. So every session ended with a kind of a mini exhibition. Everybody stuck up their drawing onto the wall. I was recently reading a text that mentioned the opening line of John Berger's On Drawing. For the artist, drawing is discovery. Berger argues that drawing is an efficient tool for enhancing experience, especially when viewed as an autobiographical record of one's discovery of an event seen, remembered, or imagined. The collaborative drawings were engaging. Everyone was curious to see and find parts of the scene they had not noticed. I can also see how these workshops with urban professionals gave me the evidence to take the lessons learned into my idea generation workshops. I was out of my comfort zone in those future workshops, but I listened and I was problem solving. I can see how powerful a tool sketching can be, not only for urban professionals looking at the city, but also for other non-drawers. I am very often asking students to use sketching as a way to open up a gap through which to look through and find new ways of seeing or understanding their subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilga. And next up is Helene Fromen, who Helene positions her art practice at the crossroads of drawing, performance, and in situ or collective intervention. Helene has been facilitating the life drawing workshop Modèle Vivant for more than 1 year now and has conducted research entitled Gender Trouble in the Life Room, How to Transform Life Drawing into an Emancipatory Practice.
Hi, Chloe, thank you for having me. My approach to life drawing is political, and I'm inspired by Jérôme Bell's work in radically renewing contemporary dance and choreography. And my practice and research are aiming at renewing life drawing to unsettle the conservative status quo upon sexism and gender normalization. So I am facilitating a life drawing workshop that is called Modèle Vivant for more than 1 year now. And my epistemological, I would say, framework when organizing Modèle Vivant is transfeminist. I co-founded Modèle Vivant with Linda, who is a trans woman who is here on the picture. And transfeminism, in 2 words, I would say, is profoundly inclusive and intersectional. When setting up a life drawing workshop, I focus, or I mostly, if not only, take care of the model in order to turn the life room into a time and space for a model to perform. By performing, I mean trying to be one's own body or performing one's gender identity. In terms of historical references, I am rather looking at performance artists such as Claude Cahin, Linda Banglis, Adrienne Piper, Sharon Hayes, or here Alexandra is a model who is here conducting a live session inspired by Marie Antoinette. Performing as a model may become an empowering experience of embodiment. As per Barbara Kruger advice, your body is a battleground, which can be turned into a prompt, my body is a playground. To make it clear, nakedness is not mandatory in a renewed life room. Active choice made by the model is key. Posing or getting progressively naked is often part of the challenge, not forcing oneself to do so, and defining one's own way of getting around it is possible. When posing, I personally played with my ultramarine blue outfit, accepting my body and authorizing myself to perform my gender identity in a personal way was and still is an ongoing process, as gender performance itself in its trial, repetition, failure, self-humor, and thinking of oneself as an animal may help. It may empower and open up multiple possibilities. One may wonder, how is this concerning teaching drawing? The next word, this word, contagion, is key to me. Within the life room, the model's emancipation may contaminate the drawings that are produced. And it takes determination to keep the life room open to experimentation outside technical, academical, and comfortable habits. With this in mind, those slides are concerning both models and artists with no hierarchy and a purposeful indetermination. Actually, practicing in the life room revolves around a matter of presence. This concerns all the people participating and no longer reasoning in a hierarchical way. Reciprocity between the artist and the model's position becomes obvious. The artist and the model are in the same place, exactly the same place. Take a look. If you look at me, who am I looking at? This was a quote from Céline Sciamma's movie, Portrait de la jeune fille en feu. The atmosphere within the life room is usually very calm and almost meditative, which is good. Still, keeping in mind a certain playfulness in the air cannot harm. Through everybody's participation and behavior, the life room may become a safe place where benevolence is prevailing at all stages. One cannot declare a space as safe. One can only contribute and take good care to building a safe place. And this will be both collective and ephemeral. This way, the life room may become a place for mutual self-esteem rising. I love this drawing made by Anaïs from Raquel so much, including the little animal here I can see in the middle, maybe, and Monique Wittig's words. Also, one of my preferred drawings ever made at Modèle Vivant. It was a special event last September. We were more than 50 people both drawing and posing one for the others. So it was problematic, COVIDly speaking, but still an amazing experience. For this special event, we had to write down rules, focusing explicitly on consent, respect, free will, and benevolence was key to build as safe a place as possible. And establishing rules and getting to a collective agreement is now an important part of any workshop I am organizing. One last possible emancipatory effect is regarding one's relationship to the other's gaze, and also including the viewer's gaze upon the drawings. Personally, I was long terrified at the idea that I was fueling voyeurism when posting my drawings on social networks. I had to accept I have no control over this, and also I had to gain trust in what the drawings are vehiculating by themselves. So experimenting, doing again, failing and keeping on knowing, distancing from the ideal of an exact representation of the model is key. And disseminating would be the last word. Drawings are so diverse that they are possibly the best vehicles for the diversity of the bodies and identities, their fluidity and variance. Thank you.
Beautiful, Helene, thank you. This is now when we come to the pause, and so you'll have to, Anita, if you don't mind stopping the presentation. We will offer everybody 5 minutes away from the screen, or just to absorb all the amazing amount of information, ideas, images. We will, if you don't mind, Anita, stopping the presentation, that would be great. So the idea is that, Helene, you're back on screen now. The idea is that we do give people a pause. I can see Anita's mouse moving around the screen there. I think we've stopped. So just to say to everybody, we will come back in 5 minutes. So at 3:45 UK time.
The world can't hear us on here, can it?
Sorry.
Can the world hear us now?
Yes, it can.
Okay. Hi, world.
So, hi, world. Exactly. The world can. So we'll turn our cameras off and we'll be back in 5 minutes, everybody. Okay. See you then. Thank you so much. It was brilliant. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Is everyone back? That's great. I can hear you, Joan.
Good.
Joan and Eileen, who are next. We'll just wait for the pause to...
Hi, everybody. It goes very quickly.
It does. Okay, wonderful. Joan Beadle and Eileen Simpson. Joan is currently Senior Lecturer in Foundation Studies at Manchester School of Art, MMU, having worked as an artist and designer and educator for over 35 years. Eileen is a reader in Fine Art at Manchester School of Art, MMU, and she teaches on Foundation Studies and BA Fine Art and works at the intersection of art, music and information networks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chloe, and thanks to Drawing Project UK for the opportunity to talk about our project, Union Score. We work together at Manchester School of Art. The way in which we work together is a form of collaborative team teaching, devising and delivering projects to introduce students to drawing. This project is in constant evolution. Union Score is the latest iteration of our one-day performative drawing workshops, in turn part of a 3-day drawing lab project where we encourage the students to take an investigative approach, not only through drawing, but also into drawing. And we have a laboratory analogy, which is a kind of playful provocation, which promotes experimentation, documentation, analysis, and also a bit of dressing up. It's the very first week of foundation. There are around 90 students in the workshop interested in all areas of art and design. The exercises are designed to be accessible and not dependent on previous drawing skills. Investigations include what are we doing physically when we're drawing? How do we make a drawing? How do we make a mark? Encouraging investigations and considerations of the performative self when drawing, promoting a focus on the physical and psychological approaches to the act of drawing. It's a very fast-moving workshop. As a taught session, it's very much a live project which needs constant steerage and tempering, not least to ensure it's actually health and safety compliant. Students and staff are both risk-taking, all pushing boundaries, and it always feels on the edge of chaos, which is an exciting, if unnerving, place to be.
And prior to the practical drawing exercises, we share with the students over 100 images of artists and designers and their approaches to expanded drawing. So here's Matthew Barney trampolining to make marks on a ceiling, and a student exploring drawing with restraints in response to this. So we focus on the performative qualities of the work, the way you prepare for a performance, create the conditions for it and document it. A central image to promote the workshop is Janine Antoni's loving care, mopping the floor with the gallery with her hair soaked in dye. And a key reference, David Hammond's basketball drawings, repeated marks made by everyday activities like the action of bouncing a ball. And we're encouraged to move out of the students are encouraged to move out of the studio in the afternoon, and they seek to occupy spaces in the college where they can stretch out. They scale up their drawing experiments, and they're more ambitious, equipped with materials. And we ask with prompts, how far can you reach or expand, extend, rotate, elevate? So creating marks as a trace of body movements. Students decide themselves what they will build on. The slide here, you can see the student has decided to stretch out and kind of work with swimming, and I think that video has made the presentation pause somewhat. But in the next slide you'll see that they choose what they want to expand on, but the next drawing emerges as a kind of score with marks made in response to music and rhythms. And it's interesting to note here that the format of the paper changes in relation to the project. So we've got a long stretch of paper that a student is working on. Or
Eileen, do you, excuse me to interrupt, would you need us to launch to jig the presentation along?
I think
here we go.
I think yes, the next slide would be great.
The video is working now, so
yeah.
So hopefully that will make the next one move.
So on the next slide you will see. Yeah, I think it's not moving on to the next. Maybe we can just jig it along to the next slide. Perfect.
Yep.
Great. And so you can see that students do take the project and they decide what they're going to build on. So this emerges as a kind of score with marks made in response to music and rhythms. And it's interesting, as we were saying, to note the format of the paper and this idea of getting prepared for your drawing, for your performance. So this is long and narrow to accommodate the continuous marks. In 2018, we occupied the gallery space at Home Manchester, and the spirit of Foundation is always to be on the lookout for more space to accommodate our workshop of more than 90 students. And curator Sarah Perks, who was at Home and now at MEMA, allowed us to transport our experimental lab to their empty gallery space in between exhibitions, and we could work with the liveness of the event.
So increasingly the ease with which the process can be recorded has an impact on how we can sort of integrate this into the project. And this year the documentation was even more critical and crucial to the project because we're doing it all online. There are a collection of ways in which students reflect on the process, and some of them are shown here through recording and presenting it in notebooks and on worksheets. And this reflecting and recapping and representing are really important aspects of the project's educational journey because they reveal to students and to staff what actually took place. Students will we promote students to follow up activity through kind of individual development, and students respond to this in a variety of ways, finding spaces to extend their performative drawing ideas at home, in halls of residence, in corridors, and in different spaces. And here you can see Foundation students taking part in follow-up activities, and all the Foundation students take part in this project, and not all of them are interested in performance or interested in drawing in that sense. And this is a fashion student doing a follow-up activity using a climbing harness, drawing on some of his French windows at home. And this reflective approach continues throughout the year. So as part of her final major project, another fashion student decided to reflect back on the performative drawing exercises and transformed it into performative fabric cutting to make cut forms in fabric and develop these into wearable forms. And you can also see one of her charcoal drawings has been transformed into a print. In our most recent version of performative drawing, we produced a collaborative drawing called Union Score, which involved 84 students. On this occasion collaborating, working with colleague and artist Ben White, responding and documenting to current events, namely the unfolding Brexit situation, and students listened and responded with mark making to open source sounds of all the 28 different member states of the European Union.
And so that process was recorded and edited as a short film that shows the 3 separate responses to the same sounds, all drawn simultaneously. And to prepare, we imagined the body and the hands as a drawing machine. A carefully choreographed handover happened as they kind of passed the baton on.
So the 9-meter drawing was eventually, and the video was eventually exhibited in the Holden Gallery at MMU, and this enabled the 84 collaborators and the rest of the art school to view the project, process and outcomes. Coincided with applicants arriving for interviews, so it sort of demonstrated one of the answers to the questions, what do art students do all day, or indeed in one day?
And that's a detail of the large drawing, the drawn responses to those sounds from those 28 member states of the European Union. So from the sound of geese flying overhead in Stockholm to a border crossing in Spain or a departure gate at Riga International Airport, a collection of marks from 90 plus students at the start of their foundation journey, a kind of explosion of potential expressed through drawing, a unique marks collaboratively made.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And now over to Pattreeda Prasarnthing. Pattreeda is an illustrator based in Bangkok, Thailand. Along with being an illustrator, she also runs several workshops with children to encourage them to have fun drawing based on the easiest way to draw and from the premise if there were no erasers in the world.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. The method I want to present to you today is called one-line drawing, which is I just want the children to feel that drawing is easy and fun and easy to achievable. So I always start my workshop with a drawing test, which I will ask the children to draw from point A to point B to point C. And if you can do this, you pass the test. And if you pass the test, you definitely can draw because you can move your hand to the directions you want. this test just aim to give children more confidence in drawing. And then I will ask them that if they know what I'm drawing with only one line. And from my experience, they can answer it surprisingly quickly because their imagination is already wide open. And the younger they are, the faster they can answer. So the method itself is just to tell the children to draw the only one important line of the subject. In the easier way, just tell them to draw the shadow of the subject, like you can see from the image. Just draw the elephant's shadow. So the method is like when you draw the most important line of the subject you're drawing, it's like you've built a core structure of your drawing, and then the rest is up to you. You can put the face, you can put texture, color, whatsoever, or you can just even leave it like that. Can you guess what is this drawing? Actually, it's a man dancing, but once I've got the answer that it is a roasted chicken. So the method is just to leave the creativity open. And then after the one line, the children is encouraged to distort the one line to be the proportion of their preference. They can make it more realistic or in cute character way. It's up to them. The process is just to build confidence in drawing the main line. And then they are asked to finish drawing with technique that they like, the color or whatever, up to their style, but just based on one line. So this method is I can use it in the workshop with children in very young age. This is a 5-year-old workshop. I asked them to use the one line drawing to run a running away elephant. And I love every elephant they draw. They are so unique and charming. And actually there is a running away from the ghost. And this is another workshop I did with 8 years old. You can see from the older age, he's feel so tempting to add the details in the image, but he still captured one line very, very well. And one line method is used in the different way of workshop. This one is I did face massage portrait workshop. I used one line drawing, as you will see in the next slide. The workshop of face massage portrait, you can see that I asked the children to massage the parents' face without looking. So this way they get the silhouette of the face by massaging, touching, but not looking. And then they draw the face silhouette and finish it with the collage technique. So it's a little bit different from what they see every day and the big idea of the silhouette they get from touching and feeling. And it was a fun workshop. On the right hand is the parents do the same with the children and they draw the children. And next slide is the workshop. I also use this method with older adults because some of them haven't drawn anything before. This is about 70 years old. So I ask them to use one line drawing to get the shape of the flower, and then they feel free to add the details and the color later. So the good thing about this method that it is very, very easy to understand, to do, to teach, to practice, and it helps you to catch the big idea of things. So when you get the big ideas of things, it can apply to use with a lot of workshop and teaching. Like this one, I used one line workshop to start the workshop. And then we finish it with a collage technique. And this is the different age of children, but we work along with the one line method very well. And then I love that goes in the Nintendo. So the good thing about it, another good thing is you can practice it everywhere. You can look at the place, people, and just visualize that drawing there one line. You can even do it with this photo of Bangkok. And you can do it wherever you are. You can do it in the tube when you're in the park, or sketch people who walking by on the street. This way you have to get the one line very quickly before they walk past, and it helps you understand the big idea of things. So, but if you don't want to do it very, very quickly, you can do it another way, which is do it very, very slowly. Like you just concentrate on getting the big idea of things and drawing it with only one line. But this way you will practice your eyes, your hands, and your mind together. And sometimes it can be a meditating moment of drawing. So thank you. And I hope you enjoy the session, and it's wonderful to share this and listen to all of the ideas of drawing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It makes me want to do a one-line drawing now after this. So the next presenter is Emma Teresa Jude, Emma is a working geologist. She's been drawing alongside and as part of her professional practice her whole career, and exhibits as a landscape artist. During 2020-21, she founded and leads the weekly live stream Thursday Night Drawing Club, an Instagram-based online community of artists. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you. So as you said, my day job is a geologist, and I fit my landscape practice around that. Bridging the art-science divide from the scientific side, I run a non-profit organisation called the Draw Out Project, where one goal is to bring non-scientist adults into science spaces through drawing workshops like this one at the Geological Society. Here's an example of the work I was doing up until early last year. A group of students, many of whom had not set foot in a science museum for many years, were generating a collaborative experimental drawing after a full day's engagement with an iguanodon skeleton, so a dinosaur at the Sedgwick Museum in Cambridge. When COVID hit the UK in March last year, many people were unsure about what isolation would look like and very anxious about the mental health implications. Last March, I proposed and held a collaborative experimental drawing live stream over on Instagram. I certainly never thought I would be still running them 35 classes and nearly a whole year later. It was from this first class that the Thursday Night Drawing Club was born. It's an international, diverse community of artists who come together every week and engage in a loosely taught drawing event live streamed on Instagram. I host the class and lead the proposed exercises, but it's very much a collaborative experience. The overall framework of the classes follows quite a stable pattern. The group selects a theme, generally from areas I know, like landscape or natural history, and this is a typical flyer. We all download the same resources. We have a well-established warm-up, and from there we jump into several longer exercises, taking about 90 minutes. The class then shares and discusses the results together. What we found very quickly was that the most successful themes and the ones that built the greatest connection between us were those where we used virtual 3D type tools to engage with, in some ways exist within the same space. And here's an example of a 3D tour of a cave system in Vietnam, which proved very popular and we have returned to. And here are some of the diverse results of the exercises. Participants engage with the virtual space much as you might a physical drawing trip, so exploring different areas, going off on their own and coming back together to share responses and reflect on one another's work, which is really beautiful. So on the next slide are some other examples of virtual spaces that we've engaged with, and obviously more become available all the time. Here's a street view tour of Kew Gardens, a 3D viewer tool of the Oxford University Natural History Museum, and a Google Earth tour of the southwestern US, all of which have formed the basis for some of our classes. The class has always been about disconnecting the satisfaction in the process of creativity from the result. And so we do lots of, quote, bad drawing type exercises focused on freeing up students. The approach has always been centered around the attitude of what else were we going to be doing tonight, which is particularly helpful in lockdown. That being said, we do switch between experimental drawing approaches and those with a more solid technical basis. So some examples here show work focused on drawing negative space using tangles of wires from our cupboards, and compositional thumbnails drawn from watching the nature documentary together. So here's an example of a typical exercise in which a complicated subject, here a slab of fossils from a museum, is broken down into the same drawing at 5-minute, 3-minute, 1-minute and 30-second intervals. The class is then encouraged to analyse the drawings and compare, and many often end up preferring the shorter versions for the freshness and simplicity. Alternatively, this exercise requires students to consider mark making. First, we did a blind contour drawing of a deep water landscape from a submersible, focusing on the texture, and then did a true eyes closed drawing to consider which parts of the drawing were most compelling and most memorable. And while I provide exercises, there's always an overriding invitation to stick with something or to go off and do your own thing, inspired by the subject if it really pulls at you. And some of the examples are often the most exciting, the most surprising, some collage or brightly coloured examples here. And there have also been examples of members going far beyond the theme of a class and developing an entire body of work based on it. This member has developed a series of stunning drawings based on and going far beyond a class on drawing into abstraction using Google Earth satellite images. Many artists in the community are engaging pretty deeply in mutual crit and support beyond the Thursday classes. It's a fantastic way to get really meaningful feedback and motivation, mostly for people at an early stage in drawing and without the support of formal educational structures. The class is diverse in age, background, geographic location. We have members from as far apart as Australia and Canada, everyone from retirees, stay-at-home parents, school students, everyone really. Many of our attendees only come once or twice, and that's just as encouraged and welcome as regular attendance week by week. In more recent months, we've been expanding the interactive element to draw on the expertise of class members. So we've had recently sessions here led by a film director member who's analysing a composition on the left, and an oceanographic scientist on the right who led the submersible underwater class. It's fantastic. One of the most satisfying elements is seeing attendees actively engage in the well-being of the community. Examples include on the left, students putting together a guide on how to make charcoal for a class, coming together for a food bank fundraiser, or as surprising here on the right as a member reciting poetry while he shared his work with the group. There's no plan right now to halt the classes. The ethos has always been that they will be there as long as people need them. We'll continue with a mixture of new themes, some member-led classes, and some repeats of old favourites, although we're now discussing as a group inviting artists to speak to us about the work that we admire. The community is a wonderful, endlessly supportive place, and it's been so important for me and many others over this last year. There's always room for new members, and we'd love to welcome any attendees from the audience today. If you'd like to give it a try, the next class will be next Thursday at 8 p.m. UK time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. I love discovering that. Over to Samleh Shahcheraghi. Samleh is currently studying the Master of Visual Culture and Post-Contemporary Practice at the Master Institute of Visual Culture in St. Just. Her focus is on phenomenology and drawing. How do we perceive objects and how does drawing change perception? Thank you, Samleh.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Let's think about our perception of an object through drawing. Here is some frames I made by my drawing and real object behind my drawing to show the eye error, and then using Cézanne composition to think about how we see an object through drawing. A text on Martin Heidegger helps me to think about eye error and what happens to our perception when we draw an object. We can either pick the hammer up and use it, or we can contemplate it from a distance. When we pick up the hammer and use it, the hammer is ready to be put to work, assuming we know how to wield it. In the second case, what Heidegger calls present at hand, we simply stare at the hammer as an object, trying to make sense of it by some kind of intellectual analysis. In this case, Heidegger claims that we never uncover the true being of the hammer as a tool. We are simply confronted with a curious lump of interphysical stuff. When everything is working well, we have no need to think about the hammer. Instead, we can just enjoy the experience of getting a good job done. And I want to add that when everything is working well, we have no need to see. Can drawing help us to see an object without thinking about the functionality? How can we think about it by drawing? I believe that by drawing simple shape, we can improve our way of seeing. First, my idea is seeing the object and try to draw in, and it's very important part. We see negative and positive spaces around the object and make some drawing of it. It can help us to see the object exactly as what Morandi did with objects. I remember after 4 years figurative drawing, I decided to draw my surrounding. A drawing teacher said me that, can you draw a cube in front of you? And I realized that I draw a cube by my mind and perspective rules, and I don't see the cube exactly. Then I found that I can improve my way of seeing by drawing the simple shape. Seeing positive, negative, and lines around the shape help us to transfer our eyes from blindness to seeing the object again and again. Okay, I'm too fast. Making abstract drawing and perception. James Elkin says that I would say drawing are blind and about blindness because they deeply involve the body. The drawing also begins in blindness with a pure white sheet. At the moment when the artist sets the pencil to paper, here is nothing to see, and the first mark is framed in isolation and emptiness. As the pencil travels along the page, it always moves into blindness, leaving behind a narrow path of vision. Elkin says that there is a gap between drawing and seeing, which is considered as a form of blindness. My idea is try to this matter by drawing through blindness. How can we draw and see our blindness? Imagine you have a different material as a drawing tool, for example, a camera as a pen. You start drawing an object and see exactly the tracing of the pen and follow it. Then you use a black and white effect to record the film based on what you saw while drawing. Can you change the position of the camera based on your drawing? Does the camera help you to see the abstract details of the object? Can you make some drawing by using other media to see your blindness? Here you can see the abstract detail of the cup by camera.
It may be that we're stuck on the slide because of the video. Yeah. I wonder, Anita, do you mind going back to the original presentation? Thank you. It was very beautiful watching that cup. I was mesmerized. I could have, I didn't realize the 20 seconds had gone. I'll come back in a minute. There we go. Yes. Thank you, Anita.
Besides, I take advantage of repetition process to investigate how we draw an object. What happens when we make drawing of an object over and over. In drawing, phenomenology drawing, the essay of repetitive process, Deborah Harty says that it was notable that whilst creating a series of drawing through different repetitive process may differ, each induced a fluctuating state of consciousness. Deborah Harty uses different materials such as knives and charcoal to try different process of repetition. Using this process, I realized that my mind is trying to create new forms and ideas. For example, I create new lines by the process of repetition. I mean the line itself, not the form of it. I wanted to know how many lines can be drawn with a simple paper, a calligraphy pen, and some ink, without any additional material at first. After drawing some lines, I found that it's impossible to draw a new line. And this is the starting point and very important. Then I started to think about new way of making line, for example, by scraping or crushing paper and draw a new line, or drawing with saddle of pen or width of it. Is it possible to not use the ink and draw with the pen? Then I consider that I can use extra material on my paper, for example, a combination of glue and ink. If the process continues, I would make new lines. Each visual element can be drawn by this repetition process. The new lines or visual element or object would have new impression, and then we can use them in our drawing or painting. And I use all the lines in drawing. And I want to finish my presentation by the sentence of Cézanne. And I think that this sentence is a good idea for making drawing. Here on the edge of the river, the motifs are very plentiful. The same subject seen from a different angle gives the subject for study of the highest interest, and so varied that I think I could be occupied for months without changing my place, simply bending a little more to the right or left. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. As I said, I got mesmerized by the beautiful moving images. Next up is Steve Lovett, last but not least, born in Auckland, New Zealand. He's taught in tertiary art schools for nearly 3 decades. He recently completed postgraduate research into literary acquisition in art and design. Thank you so much, Steve. I know it's early for you.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Wonderful.
Oh, very good. Look, the thing that initiated this project was when we went into lockdown last year, the school closed and the students didn't have access to studios to work in and develop their projects. And so drawing becomes this kind of issue when we think about how we draw and how drawing contributes to a larger studio project. This is probably a bit different than everybody else's presentations in the sense that I don't think about drawing as a separate thing. Drawing contributes to a studio project, and that's what this is really about. And people locked out of studios found themselves referring back continually to pieces of work, and drawing became a process which was indicative of something that would happen later on, and it became a contributor to a project. And so Sarah Duffy, really interesting kind of sense here that Sarah couldn't draw or anything, but her research, which is in the next slide from an Australian artist, contributed to Sarah making these light drawings where she's doing burnouts in a paddock near her house. And the thing with the lockdown that we had here, it was a complete lockdown in the sense that for 7 weeks, we had no contact with anybody. Shops were closed, students ran out of materials. And so when people would say, oh, cast something or make something at home, if you missed one thing, if you didn't have one ingredient, you were kind of screwed. So we came to this drawing process, and it didn't matter whether you were drawing in an old diary or you made a book, and we made quite a few books out of scrap materials that we could find and locate. The book became this way that we could forward project and make notes. And the important thing about making notes was that while we might be still in our little studio spaces and our bedrooms and on our kitchen tables or on our verandas or wherever we were able to work, the language allowed us to create search terms that we could begin to look outside of our practice at other things and other places and go other places. And while libraries might have been closed to us. We could look at online databases, and there's a couple of slides at the end that kind of we did this. And so, you know, in some instances, you know, like Francis had a reasonable kind of workspace to work in, but one student talked about what I could make had to be made on my bed, in my bedroom, with whatever available materials I had at my disposal. One of the places that we went to is Austin Kleon, who has a really lovely set of books, Steal Like an Artist, Show Your Work. And this becomes a kind of a methodology for doing research around drawing and around studio production. These are examples of more sketchbook stuff where people are taking source material that they have and reworking them and turning them into things that maybe they don't turn into a studio project, but allows people to think about what they were doing. Because when the school was closed and the students were locked out of studio spaces to make, the point of going to an art school is to make, and it began to kind of undo the students' kind of sense of themselves and what they were doing at art school. We are fortunately out of that now, and I'm just at the moment supervising students kind of finishing. This is a piece of this is a book that I made during this process, and I made a little animation of it flicking over, and my thing was to cut out things. And the drawing project that we did comes from the sketchbook project in New York, the sketchbook library in Brooklyn. Another example of somebody doing a sketch project with what available materials they had, photographs and stitching and stuff. And we found in the lockdown that drawing became a salvation, even if it was done with contingent stuff, that it wasn't something that ended up, but some very resourceful people like Simon Ingram made drawing machines out of Lego and kind of spare parts, and began to kind of think about how to kind of approach drawing in a way that was completely different from other aspects of practice. And other people found that they were kind of turning back and reworking old drawings and continuing to do a practice. I don't know what the lockdown has been like for you in the UK, but here, the students in the art school found that drawing in this sense, and then the applying of language to drawing, that allowed them to go and search and investigate other ideas that could feed into and alter their practice, even while they were locked out of studio, became a really powerful motivator to become engaged with stuff. Now, the Housebound Art Club, which is still running, allowed us to share work with one another. And so this was run through Art Space Aotearoa, who had an Instagram residency program. Housebound Art Club is still going, and this was a way that we shared lots of information and communicated with one another. We began Zoom walks through lots of these resources, as you can see on screen, some in the UK, some in the US. And this was the way that we could see what our peers were doing. And it was a way that we could measure what we were doing in isolation. I didn't see anybody for 7 weeks. And so this is the larger project that ArtSpace ran. And, oh, that's about platforms there. The drawing process becomes one of establishing a visual language that allows us to communicate with other people.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Steve. That just forced you into the thank you, forced you into the last, it's the last slide there. That is the end of what an amazing set of presentations. I hope everyone in the audience has just enjoyed that as much as I have. Anita, I think we come back now to the group of presenters, and we will be taking questions from the audience. We know you're out there. We can't see you, but we can feel you strangely through the virtual space.
I'm just going to take the spotlight off everybody. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, but first of all, can I say what a brilliant event, amazing panoply of drawing practice and teaching drawing, and what a fantastic afternoon of inspiring activity. So it's been really amazing to listen to, and lots of things that I feel will chime with the audience. So we should be all on screen, I'm hoping. And we do have a question, if you want to put your cameras on, panelists. And we do have a question that's come in on the chat to, I'm going to find it, I think it's to Helene, which is from Dira Chakraborty, who says, I love your collages. Do you use the life drawing exercises to develop them? I don't know, Helene, if you want to come in. You need to unmute. Yep.
I am.
Brilliant.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the person has looked at my Instagram, because indeed I started collage as a, but to me, it's quite separate from the life drawing, and I'm still struggling when I want to find some invisible connection in between those two. I guess there are many links, including the fact that the collage also remain very organic as forms and shapes, but there is no direct link. So it's a complex thing, kind of my two brains, I guess. I don't know.
Which is just, I think that's a great answer. I mean, it's the one question that's come through. I have to say, the feed on YouTube is incredibly full of people being super inspired by all the activity and all the input and inspiring activities that have just taken place. And I think in terms of the way that it represents the role of drawing, I think there's a lot of things around lockdown. And if I think about Steve's comments around lockdown and what it meant here, we're still in lockdown here. And, you know, I think drawing has played a particular role for creatives, but way beyond, if you think about Emma's presentation too. So, you know, there are lots of fantastically inspiring ideas about both teaching drawing, but actually also drawing much more widely as a means of communication and expression, used both to look and to see and to document, but also to express. So I think it's been a really rich presentation. Chloe, over to you.
Well, I was just going to say, it actually just, I'm like itching to draw. That's what makes, because it's so, I think the format of the PechaKucha as well, it makes it also particularly visual and rich in that way. And obviously we're all artists, and that's how we express ourselves. So like the visual is really, really important. And I was watching it went from Pattreeda's into Samleh's, and it just the one line drawing of the children into the one line of Samleh's process, and there were these like links between and overlaps and conversations, I think, that are happening between the presentations. And I think the presenters are kind of itching to get together. I was seeing the chat to actually talk together, because this is in an interesting way. It's like the first meeting of everybody in this forum. But I feel very excited that this has been made possible from this shared passion of the people here in this panel, and that we will find ways to keep talking to each other. Do you have a question?
We do. We have a number of questions. They're just starting to roll in. It takes a little
delay.
Moment. So there are a number of questions which I think are actually to, I don't know who would want to take it. There's a question from Donna Thompson about how the panelists have used drawings to help themselves in these times. So if anyone wants to take that, we don't all need to answer, but Duncan, that would be great.
I think drawing has been tremendously valuable on so many levels during these times. I've always loved drawing and gone to drawing as a space where I feel safe and get kind of reassurance and focus and calm. I'm quite hectic often. When I didn't do very well on my O levels, I went up to the greensward above the beach years ago, and I just sat drawing a hotel for 5 hours. And looking back, it was very clear that that should have been the place I was heading. I was going to do science at that time. So drawing's always been that space for me. And what I think I've really realized in lockdown actually is it's a space for so many, and also how I value the collaboration and interactions with others with regard to drawing in a way perhaps I hadn't perceived before lockdown. I felt it was quite isolating, not in a bad way, it's just a place I went but on my own. But actually that conversation you so naturally have all the time in teaching with other people about drawing and sharing, when that was taken away, you suddenly felt this gulf. It was missing. And actually finding some, well, actually a tremendous return of that engagement, collaboration online has been one of the gifts of this difficult experience. I really hope that that collaborative activity that has persisted in the online space, carries on in some form beyond this difficult last year, because it has been wonderful actually sharing online and drawing together in new ways.
Brilliant. That's a great answer. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in.
I was involved in a mail art project with 3 friends, and it's actually started before the in 2019, but it kind of in theory it started in 2019, and we did actually start in January, February, and then by the time I received the second or the third drawing, it was lockdown here in the UK. And that was really interesting that we had these big pieces of paper that were going around in the post, collaborating by the postal service, kind of mail art, but it became increasingly kind of significant, sharing, talking, and drawing together, meeting in the space of the paper.
Great, that's fantastic, thank you. I don't know if anyone else wants to come. We've actually got more questions coming, so maybe if we just take...
If I can add just one point.
Perfect, Steve.
Drawing process. The students that I work with at the university found when they were locked out of studios and locked out of kind of the process of making, that drawing, and then we set targets, like so many drawings a week and stuff. This was actually a way for us to have an ongoing conversation with one another through images. And I don't know what the student profile is in the UK with people entering art schools, but many kids in New Zealand who enter art schools do so because other aspects of their semantic and syntactical learning is deficient. And so the drawing process became a way for us to continue to imagine making, even when physically we couldn't get into a casting studio or a print lab or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's been incredibly important entirely across education. And I think it's also one of the reasons why we've had a huge uptake through this programme that we've been running from drawing projects all through the last couple of weeks, and actually previously, well, actually since October with Chloe, because there is that desire to connect through something that has that trace, I think, of physical material thinking. And we can still do that in a digital world.
Yeah, we would call it a visual conversation very often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're really important visual conversations. They're always important, but they've been more and more important in lockdown. There are a few more questions, and I'm going to try and group them a little bit because some are about pedagogy and delivery, and some of them are around the influence of this on your own practice. So somebody has asked if any of you would be willing to talk about how teaching influences your own practice and maybe what you've gained from teaching during the months of lockdown. I think we've started to touch on that, but maybe there's another response. Emma, did you want to respond?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was your hand up.
It was. Yeah, actually, it's been really, really useful for me in the approach that I've been describing of kind of live streaming. I tried to kind of demonstrate from the photographs that the main medium there is actually like a phone stream of me drawing. After such a long time doing this, I honestly really don't care if I do something like bad in front of everyone or bad to produce something that's not what I was expecting. You have to let go of that if you're going to be able to sort of turn up every week in that way and have it recorded. And I think that's actually turned up in my own practice quite a lot as a result. It's certainly helped me to let go quite a lot more, and seeing all of my students do the same kind of thing as well, it's been really inspirational.
Brilliant, that's fantastic, thank you. And shall I ask it, Duncan?
I mean, I'd agree with that entirely. I think, I realised how much I miss the interactions with my students, not just purely the kind of, mechanics of teaching, but just the conversation, the social interaction, the being inspired by others' work. In so many ways, I get so much back from the teaching of drawing. It is in itself, a teaching that runs in both directions. There's tremendous, sharing and solidarity. And I think a lot of students are quite cautious, or they lack confidence for all sorts of reasons, certainly when they first arrive in art college at foundation with me. And it's about breaking down that trepidation. And that became initially quite challenging on Zoom because it felt quite exposing, a lot of students having their cameras off or not being quiet, being very quiet. And actually by drawing over Zoom in that space, it becomes a conversation, and the sharing of everybody's drawings, you can see in the space of 1 or 2 lessons how quickly confidence increases, because we've all found new ways to work. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure like all the artists here, I get as much back as I give out as a lecturer teaching.
Yeah. Fantastic.
More.
Always. It's a really inspiring thing to do. There's a question from Joan Woodhouse for Joan and Eileen, which is, can you say what the foundation students take away from their drawing exercises into future pathways and practices?
I think, yes, thanks for the question, Jo. Well, we can share the question. We can share the answer if you like. I think some of the images that we were showing how such a day's project, which is a typical foundation project in the sense that there's an awful lot packed into one day, and it's not always obvious what's been delivered in that day until afterwards, until you see how the students kind of perhaps follow up with things, or what it kind of engenders them to do. And in some of the slides that we showed earlier, there were some students who were not perhaps typical students who might have gone for something like performative drawing, but had taken elements of the project and taken it through into either their approaches to materials or their approaches to how they might use themselves in their practice. And so I think sometimes the kind of continuation is quite oblique in the sense of the follow-up on foundation. It's not necessarily a very direct follow-up, but I think there are lots of things in terms of just sometimes behavioural things that students take away from such a day, how to make a space, how to operate quickly, how to sort of behave like an art student, I think is sometimes some of the things that they might take away from that. Eileen, I don't know if you've got things to add.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's the methodology, I think, of the drawing that interests me. So how do you create the conditions to make a drawing? How do you think about recording that process? How do you create the condition for the drawing or the performance of the drawing to emerge? And the reason I really love teaching the drawing lab with Joan and in collaboration with different groups of staff, it's not just Joan and I that run it, there's lots of different strengths that people bring and ideas bring to the teaching. But I'm interested in connecting with reluctant drawers, and I'm interested in this idea of the lab space as being a kind of a level ground. So people arrive with their A-levels, with their skills, with their drawing skills, and I actually enjoy the process of breaking all that down and beginning with a line that everyone can do. And I must say, drawing has never been the first thing that I go to in my practice, but increasingly the methods that I have learned through drawing I adapt to my processes. I work a lot with video, audio, but I love to teach drawing because I think, as Duncan was saying, I get a lot out of teaching, and I learn a lot about drawing through that process. And I feel, in some ways, I'm on that level ground with those students. So I enjoy kind of the breaking down of the hierarchies. And I think that comes with a lot of emotion. There's a lot of emotion at the beginning of the course as well, because everyone has arrived and everyone wants to achieve at the best, highest level. And I quite like sort of confronting all of that in those first few days. And I think that's what those marks speak of. And that's, I think, all the energy that's in those marks. I really enjoy that. So.
That's great, thank you. There are several questions. I want to go to the ones with people working with children and young people, and whether you could offer any insights into how they have responded through drawing during the pandemic. I'm wondering whether that's Pattreeda or others in the room.
Hi, hello. So what's the question again, please?
The question is about working with children and young people during pandemic, which I'm assuming has affected most of us, if not all of us. It may not in as much in some places, but in this kind of sense of lockdown and not being able to go to schools or to work together, I guess the question really is about how has it affected people, and is that something we can evidence, I think, through drawing, and what have we seen and found?
All right, because Thailand has been locked down once, and now we kind of a little bit locked down, and the students stay at home and not go to school yet. So I think it's actually the good thing is the drawings play more important role by, I mean, when children stay at home, yeah, the most of the thing that they want to do is play a game or watch TV or draw thing, and parents encourage children to draw or work with some art or anything. And I think it's the time that we will find what our children really like or passionate about. And I think you can find a good thing about supporting the art challenge or art activities at homeschool. So yeah, and I think drawing with the children is like swimming. They all love drawing, they all love swimming. It's like a playing on the paper. So when you are at home, it's good to play with drawing and just encourage them to draw. And I mean, there's no wrong in drawing, and so just ask them to draw like there's no eraser in the world. And maybe you can find the way of teaching drawing because of your children are at home, and it would be very fun to draw together. And another thing is, I think drawing is the very good way to express the feelings or any emotion they have inside. I'm sure that everyone is a little bit stressed about being at home, locked down, but I think drawing can bring you out from the home, from the place you are, and to wherever you want. Yeah.
That's fantastic, thank you. And I'm sure I agree with you. And I think that response leads us quite nicely into another question where, because I think there's nothing you can do wrong in drawing. I'm with you on that, but we also have school curricula that kind of challenge that concept. And one of the questions from Phoebe Moss is, what do you think about teaching drawing with young people? Should it be so prescriptive, I think is what it means, as they are in secondary and primary school, or should it be freer and that freer approach be encouraged earlier? That's open to anyone, but
I mean, I'll pop in there. I think often drawing and teaching is too prescriptive. I'd agree, and I think a lot of good teaching, certainly, like talking to Joan and Eileen, foundation is about dismantling as much as it is assembling, ways of thinking. And often students arrive with kind of perceived notions of limits or borders, or just working on a rectangular page, or expecting a kind of finished drawing to be kind of coloured into the edge, or the idea that somehow there are rules. And of course there aren't. That's not to say you can't lead a class with ideas and thinking and bring things to the table. That is part of the job of being a teacher. But it is about removing those strictures. It's about building that confidence, that freedom to take risks and play. Just on the comment about children, I've got young children in my house as a father, and of course one of the wonderful values of drawing, not only quote Chloe, drawing is free, of course. It's not very resource heavy. So as long as you can find stuff to draw on, you can draw. And actually for the children, and also for me and for many, I'm sure, drawing is a way of processing thinking, processing history, observation. It's a way of thinking through events you're seeing unfolding. And actually, by diary keeping, sketchbooks, journaling, it's a way of putting something between you and difficult, uncomfortable events that we've all been living through, and a way of kind of finding a different language to address all of those concerns, or be wholly distracted from them. So it's something I'd encourage for everybody of all ages, the youngest to the oldest. It's wonderful.
That's great. Thank you. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I think for me, and I teach here in Miami, Florida, Florida International University, all levels of students. And the anxiety that I see from a lot of my students is when they have a very limited understanding of what drawing is and what drawing has to be. And so a key part of my pedagogy is to really, as you saw in my presentation, explode that. And I think the more that we can help them really see that there are lots of modes, and as we're saying again and again, no wrong way to draw, the greater comfort they have. And I felt like this year in particular, as those anxieties were really high with my students, that breaking those ideas down very quickly in the process made them a lot more comfortable, and learning happened in so many ways. And for me, that's the really exciting aspect of being in a situation like this, learning from all of you to see more voices and artists and approaches from around the world to continue feeding my teaching and what I can share with my students.
That's fantastic. Thank you. There's a question which then takes us to this wonderfully everywhere, ubiquitous online environment that we're working in. And actually there are several questions around this, which is, in terms of approaching to online drawing, are there any setbacks? Are there things that people have learned? And how has it changed practice? Both teaching, I think. Jennifer?
It just, one thing, as we were getting started teaching online, a friend of mine had a 5-year-old who was starting school for the first time. And she said he was so excited, but he didn't know any different. And so that's been my attitude through it all, to try to be a 5-year-old who didn't know any different. And it's caused me, and I'm sure others will agree, to be more creative, to come up with different solutions, and to rethink all of my approaches to everything that I do as an educator. So there are a lot of drawbacks, but I think it was a great way for me to reformulate what I do and go back to some of those questions of why.
That's great. Thanks. And Jake, would you like to come in?
Anita. Yeah, the biggest thing that we learned switching to teaching drawing online was to not try to replicate the wonderful things that we'd experienced in real life, but to accept that it's a wholly different context, and that presents a whole load of new opportunities as well as challenges, but actually that those opportunities wouldn't be possible in real life. And now that we have such a receptive online population, it sort of opens up a whole load of ways of exploring drawing as a communal activity, as sort of something uniting, but also kind of gives us a whole load of tools that we don't have in a room full of people. So, I mean, I think that extends into lots and lots of different areas, so I don't want to kind of get into all of those, but I think just starting from scratch and actually not trying to take our existing lesson plans and then turn them into digital versions, but actually just thinking, okay, we are online, we are drawing, we are together. From that foundation, what new things can we invent that make the most of this situation, rather than just trying to make do? Because we're 10 months in the UK, you know, we're not at the end of anything. And I think we're not waiting to get back to normal life drawing or drawing classes. We're actually, I think with a positive attitude, we can embrace this wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And then we can return to those other wonderful things in partnership with this new kind of digital way of working, so that there will always be, you know, kind of both options open to us. And I think embracing that positively has been really helpful for us.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jake. Joan, you had your hand up too. I can't quite see everybody, but Helene and Joan and then Helene.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that we found out in terms of dealing with our kind of community of students was to try to get to see everything. and we've been using online platforms. We've been using Padlet a lot because we wanted to somehow still retain that learning that takes place, for students to be part of that community where they see what other students are doing, not just in a critique when things are finished, but as things are being done. And we wanted to see all the scrap things and all the things that didn't work. So we were really encouraging students to upload absolutely everything, and to try and maintain something of that kind of peer-to-peer learning that is the sort of wandering around the studio equivalent, having a nosy at what everybody else is doing. And online platforms like Padlet have been invaluable in doing that. And it's been really important to keep an emphasis on keeping absolutely everything, which is a big foundation emphasis all the way through the course, but keeping all the things, even the things that you place little value on. Yeah,
that's great, thank you. And Helene?
Yeah, so as for us at Modèle Vivant, I migrated the workshop online last October during the second lockdown in France. I didn't do it the first one in spring, well, for many reasons. And it became quite soon a much awaited like rendezvous in between us all. Like we did it like twice a week at some point. And the main other impact it had on our group and on the drawings was that we spent far much time discussing the drawings, showing one another the drawing we're making, comparing them, asking for the techniques, etc., than we did in real life. In real life, we had this kind of pause in between in between the workshop, at the middle of the workshop and at the end, and we were all looking at all the drawings, but it was not the same. And it was, so now I guess it's something we will keep on doing, like focusing on sharing about the drawings more. And also we just began something still a bit more experimental, trying to draw and pose one for the others mutually within the group, also online on Zoom. And I think it's just beginning, trying to invent, having two models, putting each of us, two persons putting each of us at our own place, but still having the people who draw inventing ways of combining the drawing as if we were together. That's the kind of thing we're gonna do more and more, I guess.
That's great, thank you. And we've got Ilga who would like to come in too.
Yeah, just one small comment nobody's mentioned yet. I've been teaching drawing online for over 5 years, so it's not anything that's new for me. I just want to say there's some very underconfident or scared people out there who would never venture into a group class, or who would be very scared to venture into a group class. And I've been working with those and others, but there's that kind of element of privacy. You're doing something in the privacy of your own home or on your own table or desk, and there's no anxiety around kind of performing in front of other people as you would if you were in a group class. So I just wanted to kind of put out there that there are these kind of quite strong benefits of drawing online or teaching drawing online.
I think there are lots of benefits online, and I think what we're all looking forward to actually is having something more hybrid, because it suits some people very well, but actually there are also the people who need to draw together in order to push each other and to have a dialogue in situ. So one of the final questions in there was around, is there a frustration about always being behind the screen? I'm with you, Ilga, that I think there have been, and I'm sure Chloe would say the same, there have been some astonishing benefits about both the reach. This mini symposium wouldn't be taking place with all of you from across the world, with lots of people from across the world in the audience, without actually having been pushed to think about different platforms to have the conversation. And the drawing together, Chloe, as Drawing is Free, is running a whole set of amazing sessions. You're running amazing sessions with a long history of doing that. And I think it has allowed a different dialogue in and through drawing, and it has allowed space for people who are more cautious or don't have access to joining a group, going to whatever session it is, or finding the right person that they can work with. So I think there is a huge advantage in some ways, and I think there are other aspects that I'm sure many of us are kind of anxious to return to. So I don't know if anybody wants to just comment, both you, Ilga, and maybe someone else, on what it's like to teach entirely behind.
I was just thinking, you reminded me, I had a student who was living in a remote Scottish island, and she had no people to draw, so she was drawing animals, sheep and wheelbarrows.
Absolutely. Duncan?
What is it like to draw behind a screen? Well, I think Jake's right on the button when he says that it's not about trying to replicate, it's about finding new ways of working. And that's exactly how I feel, really. And the first lockdown, we were suddenly in lockdown, and I felt very remote from my learners, but found a new way to work. After the summer, I was back in foundation with students, and then here we find ourselves again in lockdown. And I think certainly I was better prepared this time, and we saw it coming. So we kind of prepared that online space in advance, almost knowing that it was likely to come, maintaining a bit of that in a blended weekly delivery. But getting all the students, in my case, blogging has been fantastic, because it gives me a way into, they can share their sketchbooks and process, as the others were saying, you know, Joan earlier and so on, about that view of process, which is so much part of the soft interaction with students. It's finding new ways to do that online, that sharing of the ongoing, not just the summative, because that's so much of teaching and learning. The other tiny thing I was going to say was, just in a live drawing setting, you know, I might now be in a session online with, you know, 100 people, and they might be all over the world. And then interestingly, when you share your drawings, unlike a normal life space, you've all got exactly the same point of view if you're drawing a model. So you're all sitting with exactly the same camera lens looking. And then it's really interesting just to compare how you perceive that space and that figure from exactly the same place. You're never in exactly the same place in a live room, but through Zoom on a shared session, you are. So there are lots of just interesting perspectives. And as somebody who loves drawing and love working with each other, I just so value that conversation and that sharing of practice with other people in those spaces. And I've come to, you know, really, you know, rely on it. But it's not all behind the screen.
No, it's not. That's great. Thank you. Emma wants to come in, and then we'll need to wind up because we're close to 5 o'clock. We've had a wonderful conversation. Emma, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, I was discussing some of these ideas you said about drawing behind a screen and what that feels like. One of my students actually had a discussion with her about this today, and she described it as ambient co-presence. And I kind of went and looked up that concept a little bit, and as a thing that is distinctly different from sitting on your own, because, you know, it feels like you're sitting behind a screen, you're on your own. But actually, a lot of what my students say is that even though you can't see anyone that you're drawing with, the awareness that you're actually all there in this same virtual space, and in my classes sometimes, you know, draw in this kind of virtual space as well, it's not complete disconnection. And there's something, there's something really special about that as well. Thanks.
That's terrific to hear, and a positive note. To pull that discussion and that Q&A session together. There's a lot of very positive commentary in there, lots of very distinguished people in the audience, lots of absolute champions of teaching drawing from all over the world, and talking about how fantastic the session has been. I'm going to hand over to Chloe just to do say a few words, and then I'll wind up after that.
Thank you. No, I love that ambient co-presence. I was thinking, is it just me, or I've been asking models I've worked with, like, can you feel us with you looking? And they really can. I think there's something kind of mystical in there. I was thinking it was the power of drawing to bust the virtual space, to bust through. That actually there's the intensity of looking that we all share, that this kind of concentration, this quiet concentration, that I'm so, like, I think we all are here, so addicted to, and so much wanted to keep going even in pandemic times. And it's just incredibly inspiring. I keep saying that same word. Thank you for everyone's contributions. I hope this, like Duncan was saying, you know, that we'll keep the contact even beyond. We won't just all go back into our own spaces. We'll still keep sharing with each other. And I think we're going to say goodbye now, because Anita and I are meeting again in 1 hour in the Zoom space. Some of you might be joining us, hopefully. I don't know, Anita, if you wanted to.
I just want to say an enormous thank you to you for conceiving of the idea, and I know we developed both of these two together, but Chloe, you're the champion in terms of pulling everyone together and hosting and holding the space for the day. So thank you so much for all your fabulous organisation. It's brilliant to work with Drawing is Free. And as Chloe has said, Drawing is Free and Drawing Projects UK, along with Tanya Kovacs, who runs Drawing Breath, or Drawing Breathe Me, as I tend to read it from the Instagram. We're running a session called Drawing Correspondence at 6 o'clock this evening again. So we hope that many people will be joining us. But mostly I want to say the most wonderful, deep, heartfelt thank you to everybody who's presented today, who's taken up the challenge of the PechaKucha style format and presented such really inspiring, fabulous presentations about teaching drawing. Really inspiring. To everybody who's joined us, a big thank you as well. And the recording remains there if you have the link to revisit. But we will also publish the recorded version on the Drawing Projects YouTube channel alongside the Teaching Drawing Symposium too. So a really big thank you, and reminder about Trinity Buoy Wharf Drawing Prize. This is almost the penultimate event in the programme alongside the exhibition, as it should have been in public in London. This would be the closing day. So please do visit the virtual exhibition. Please join in some of the recordings and some of the future events. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's been really wonderful to have such a lively conversation about drawing this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Anita and
Bye.
Chloe.
Lovely to see you.
Bye.
Lovely to see you all.
Hope to see you all again. I'm hoping that, not sure that Fiona's stopped live streaming yet, but we can stay on.
We can imagine that we're in a space together and we're having a drink. We'll have